I don't think that he has really won the hearts and minds of the Conservative Party in his first year or so in office. And so they are quite happy, I think, now to see him elbowed out of the way. And I think ultimately that will be the result of this crisis, that we see the Prime Minister being forced to resign as well, and possibly even a general election. I mean, Cameron has been fighting to have these 4-year fixed-term parliaments, and now we know why. It's because he's been standing on very, very fragile ground. So, I mean, quite how it all pans out is impossible to see, but I certainly think that the next person to be in the frame when he arrives back at Heathrow Airport from his nice little trip to South Africa is David Cameron. And
he's probably down there checking on his bank accounts, isn't he?
Well, I bet he's sitting out there wondering, well, maybe I should just not go back to Britain and buy a nice house out here in South Africa and just enjoy the rest of my life on the beach, and maybe Britain is not the place for me.
Now, again, Tony Gosling is a former BBC researcher, has a radio show in England. His information has always been proven to be very accurate and well-researched. And, wow, this really fleshes things out here.
Yeah,
but
because Cameron has been saying, and I'll quote him now, that the reason that Sir Paul Stevenson resigned is because it has his role in this whole affair has a direct bearing on public confidence in the police. Now, this is a funny thing to say, because David Cameron's decision to employ Andy Coulson, who was the editor of the News of the World, while all these horrendous criminal activities were going on, which nobody would have bought the paper if they knew this kind of way, this is the way they were getting stories.
Well, that's my point, is that Cameron is a protege, not just of Bilderberg, but also of Rupert Murdock. Rupert Murdoch's full empire has been behind him, and here he is hiring the head of the paper to work for him. I mean, he is right in the middle of this.
Yes, and all the last year or so, since Cameron was elected, he's been having regular meetings every couple of weeks with the chief executives of the various parts of the News International empire. So he has not realised. I mean, many of us could see this coming. When Andy Coulson was appointed to be his press secretary in the run-up to the general election, people were scratching their heads thinking, is Cameron blind? What is going on here? Because this guy is like a little ticking time bomb sitting in number 10 Downing Street. And I'm afraid that time bomb is going off right now.
Yeah, this is Nixonian to the mass. I mean to the max, and the fact that he's run off to South Africa, the fact that all these different police chiefs are stepping down, that the head of News Corps in the UK has been arrested over the weekend, the fact that they're opening up investigations in the United States and Australia. I'm going to talk about what this means for Rupert Murdoch with reporter, talk show host, researcher Tony Gosling. Stay with us. Former BBC researcher, British radio talk show host, investigator, Tony Gosling is our guest for the rest of the short segment, the next little short segment. Tony, there's so many facets to cover, but how is this going to affect Murdoch? Because you can see this is imploding fast, and
yeah,
I smell blood.
I think, to be honest with you, Alex, I think Murdoch's empire in Britain is really crumbling as we speak. That's going to be over, I think, maybe even within a month or something, because what's happened is he's got absolutely no credibility, and this is one of the things that you do actually need if you can get people to buy your newspapers, and certainly pay to view on the internet, is you need to have some credibility. That is all crumbling around him. He's been even putting adverts in his own newspapers today to try and convince the readers that what they're reading is in some way useful or true or unbiased. But let me tell you, on the page 3 of the Times today, he's got a statement which is from the resignation speech of Sir Paul Stevenson, and this is selected extracts from it. And the most important thing that Sir Paul Stevenson said, which was criticising David Cameron himself, has been omitted from those extracts. So you can see the kind of people we're dealing with News International. Propagandists, pure propagandists. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if Murdoch's empire within a month or so has just completely crumbled and disappeared here in Britain. One of the rules we have is that you've got to be a fit and proper person to run one of these big news companies, and I think he's proving beyond any shadow of a doubt that he's not a fit and proper person to do that.
Well, let me expand on that briefly.
All eyes in Britain are going to be on something tomorrow, which is called the Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee, which is where three people from News International, Rebecca Brooks, who's now been arrested and has been bailed, as well as Rupert Murdoch himself and James Murdoch, are all due to appear there tomorrow. So I imagine millions of eyes across the world will have their eyes on that. And what we're talking about here is a kind of epic struggle. It's like the Vatican versus the Crown here. Two big power networks. One is the British Parliament, and the other one is the Murdoch empire. Absolutely daggers drawn in that culture, media, and sport.
And you know, News Corp has a lot of dirt on the royal family and others they've been keeping, and so I wouldn't count Murdoch out yet. And I'll say this, just like I said with Dominique Strauss-Kahn, I don't like him, but the whole way that went down was suspicious, and now it's come out it was a setup. And all I'm saying, Tony, is I respect your view on this, and you're probably right, but at the same time, why are they going after Murdoch now? Is it that he was overshadowing the BBC and the state-run propagandist on that end? Was it that he was attempting to upset completely the old guard? I mean, sure, I believe the dirt's there, and it's a lot deeper than what they're saying, but why is it being brought out now? Back in 1 minute. Stay with us. Tony Gosling, Bilderberg.org, great talk show host, researcher, former BBC investigator, and bringing that up. Look, News Corp is propaganda, so is the BBC. We know they've gotten very jealous of the power of News Corp. I know News Corp was trying to deregulate media, some would say, so they could, take over in England. And we now know for 6 years the police have known about this and covered up the indiscretions of News Corp. So again, I go back to the start. Why are they bringing this out now? I'm not a fan of Dominique Strauss-Kahn or the IMF, but I thought it was suspicious at the time because normally these top globalists are untouchable. Why are they untouchable now? And I think you said it. There's a huge war going on, but certainly there are interests out there who aren't as pure as the driven snow either that'll be happy to see the fall of the News Corp holdings in England.
I think what's happened is that we've got a difference in attitude amongst the chiefs at News International. Is that it's a kind of pack mentality. They're starting to run scared. They're starting to make mistakes. They're starting to sort of trip up slightly, and this has really given, I think, the British establishment, which is a peculiar beast, has given them the feeling that actually now they're smelling blood and they're going to go for it because, particularly with the stories that came out about hacking the dead soldiers that had died in Afghanistan and Iraq, the hacking of the 7/7 victims, this is really like the final straw, I think. And let's not forget that Murdoch has not been loved in Britain. One of our greatest ever writers who came from my part of the world, the Forest of Dean, just into the South Wales from where Bristol is in the West Country, he was one of the greatest writers we ever had. He died about 1993, but he named, before he died, his cancer, his pancreatic cancer, he named it Rupert. And he made a speech on British television and at the Royal Television Society about this, saying, look, Rupert Murdoch is a cancer, and we've got to get rid of this cancer somehow. And before he died, that's what he said. And I think there's a feeling which has been going on for a long time. Let's not forget, Murdoch bought the Times in 1981.
But hold on, this isn't the revenge of Soros, though. I'm not saying Murdoch's good, but, I mean, Murdoch has really been bringing kind of the Al Gorean carbon tax collectivist to their knees at many levels, while at the same time ordering News Corp in the U.S. to promote global warming. And this isn't just an inter-establishment coup, counter-coup?
I don't think so. No, I think it's fueled by genuine anger about these, particularly about the hacking into murdered children's telephones, hacking into the phones of dead soldiers and their families, hacking into the phones of 7/7 victims, whilst they may be, in hospital, or this is absolutely appalling.
All right, in closing, what about the reports?
What's fueling all this right now? I don't think there's any kind of weird conspiracy behind it, but it has been a dam, Alex, which has been building right since the 1980s. The press in Britain really died in the 1980s with Rupert Murdoch's takeover of the Times newspaper in 1981, right the way through to the takeover of the BBC in 1986, which was the last time that we had a Director General of the BBC who actually was a proper current affairs program maker. That he was replaced by an accountant, and we've had all sorts of clones, sort of business-minded people.
We're out of time.
And this dam has been building. The other thing that many people don't realise in that part of the world is that Rupert Murdoch, at the time of the last election, as part of the deal for supporting Cameron and his friends, has been lobbying like crazy for the undermining of the BBC. And I think, most of the establishment in this country is much more pro-BBC than it is an internationalist like Murdoch. We like to think that we do do actually have our own broadcasting system.
All right.
That comes from Britain. And Murdock has made a big mistake in trying to attack the BBC.
Well, we're out of time, Tony. We'll have to get you back as this unfolds. But I agree, this is a BBC seizing on it. And I tell you, Murdock, BBC, I don't know which one of those things floating around in the water smells worse. But we'll continue to track it and follow it. You mentioned the infighting. His daughter reportedly is having cussing fits. So they're definitely in deep trouble. Thank you so much. We'll be right back on The Economy. Stay with us.